The neighborhood of South Side Chicago wasn't the kind of place people expected greatness to grow. Broken streetlights blinked over cracked sidewalks, and the distant sound of sirens was as familiar as the morning birds. It was a place where dreams often got stuck in the traffic of survival. Yet, in a modest one-bedroom apartment on the third floor of a rundown brick building, something extraordinary was unfolding, something that not even the city's noise could drown out. Amara Johnson was only 5 years old the first time she asked her mother, "Why do numbers always make sense when people don't?" Her mother, Lorna, laughed at the question, brushing the little girl's curls out of her face. "Baby, that's because numbers don't lie. People do." That answer stuck with Amara. While the world around her seemed chaotic and unpredictable, math gave her something steady, something pure. By the age of 8, she was doing algebra in her head while riding the city bus. Her favorite game was, count the corners, figuring out the total angles and shapes she spotted in graffiti and billboard signs. Her notebooks, once filled with doodles of flowers and hearts, were soon taken over by geometric figures, multiplication tables, and calculations that didn't belong to a child her age. Lorna worked 2 jobs, one as a night janitor and one at a local diner, so Amara spent her afternoons at the public library. There, surrounded by dusty shelves and the low hum of fluorescent lights, she found refuge in textbooks far beyond her grade level. At 12, she solved a college-level calculus problem posted on an online math forum under the name Homogeneous. No one believed it was a middle schooler behind the solution until the forum moderators asked for a video explanation. When she uploaded a shaky clip of herself walking through the steps on a whiteboard at her school, the forum erupted. Comments poured in from professors, graduate students, and even researchers from MIT. One wrote, "Who is this kid?" Another, "She's solving problems I use in lectures." Her public school math teacher, Mr. Grant, didn't believe it either at first. He had seen smart kids before, even a couple of prodigies, but there was something different about Amara. It wasn't just her speed or accuracy, it was her joy. She approached math problems the way artists approached blank canvases. She didn't solve problems so much as she composed them, each equation part of a larger symphony that only she could hear. Mr. Grant took it upon himself to mentor her, sneaking her advanced textbooks and teaching her after class. He even used his own money to buy her a second-hand graphing calculator. One afternoon, he pulled her aside and asked, "Amara, have you ever thought about applying to Lakeshore Academy?" Her eyes widened. Lakeshore was a prestigious private school known for producing Ivy League students and future CEOs. It was a world away from South Side. "They don't take girls like me," she whispered. Mr. Grant smiled. "Then we'll make them." They applied together, sending in not only her academic records but also a portfolio of her math solutions, including her online accolades and a glowing recommendation letter. Weeks later, a large white envelope arrived in the mailbox, and Lorna screamed before Amara even opened it. She was in. Full scholarship. Uniform and textbooks included. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Lakeshore Academy was beautiful and intimidating. The red brick buildings, iron gates, and sprawling lawns felt more like a university than a high school. On the first day, Amara's second-hand backpack and thrift store shoes stood in contrast to her classmates' designer coats and monogrammed lunch boxes. Some students stared. Others whispered. But Amara kept her head down and her pencil moving. Inside the classroom, it was a different story. She raised her hand more than anyone else, asked questions the teachers weren't prepared for, and finished tests before the clock had a chance to tick halfway. The teachers were impressed, but the students weren't welcoming. Whispers followed her down the hall. Some called her calculator girl. Others muttered things about scholarships and pity admits. It hurt, but not enough to stop her. That spring, Lakeshore Academy sent a team to the Illinois State Math Bowl. Amara was the youngest student ever selected to compete for the school. When the final round came down to a tiebreaker, it was Amara who stepped up to the board. The auditorium was silent as she stared at the complex expression on the screen. Her heart pounded, but her mind was calm. She wrote, paused, then underlined her final answer. The buzzer rang. She was right. Lakeshore won. The crowd erupted. It was the first time her classmates truly saw her. News traveled fast. A local newspaper ran a headline, Southside Math Prodigy Leads Private School to Victory. Reporters showed up outside the school. Mr. Grant beamed with pride when he saw the article, clipping it out and laminating it for her. Even her old neighborhood started calling her our genius. People who had never cared about math before began asking her questions, cheering her on, bragging that they lived near that girl. Despite all the noise, Amara remained focused. She wasn't chasing fame. She was chasing understanding. Math was more than a subject. It was her language, her lifeline, her lens through which she made sense of a world that often seemed unfair and unkind. She knew where she wanted to go next. Harvard. Not because it was prestigious, but because it was the place where ideas like hers were supposed to belong. At night, she would sit by her bedroom window, notebook in her lap, and dream, not just of formulas and variables, but of proving that where you're from doesn't define where you're going. Amara Johnson was the girl from nowhere, but her mind was going everywhere. The envelope was thick. Heavy. The kind of envelope that didn't just carry paper, it carried possibility. It had the Harvard University crest printed in deep red at the top left corner, and Amara Johnson stared at it as if it might vanish. Her hands trembled as she turned it over, afraid to open it, terrified not to. Lorna stood at the kitchen counter, wiping her hands on her apron, her heart pounding. Open it, baby, she whispered, barely breathing. You earned it. Amara slowly broke the seal. The paper inside was thick, elegant, the kind you almost felt wrong for folding. She unfolded it, eyes scanning quickly. Dear Miss Johnson. Congratulations. It is my great pleasure to inform you that you have been accepted into the Harvard University class of 2029. She stopped reading. Her breath caught in her throat. I got in, she whispered. Then louder, with disbelief blooming into joy, Mom, I got in. Lorna dropped the dish towel, rushed to her daughter, and wrapped her in the kind of hug only a mother can give, the kind that says I knew you could, I always believed in you, we did it. The next few days were a blur of celebration. The neighbors brought over homemade cupcakes. Mr. Grant stopped by with a red tie and said, You'll need this for your interview day, future genius. The school principal called an impromptu assembly just to announce it. First Harvard admit from our neighborhood in over a decade, he boomed into the mic, and let me remind you, she's only 17. Local media caught wind of it again. One evening, a news crew knocked on their door. The reporter was young, smile too bright, microphone aimed at Amara's face. How does it feel, she asked, to be going from the South Side to the Ivy League? Amara blinked. Honestly, she said. It feels like I just proved that zip codes don't decide futures. People do. The video went viral. Tens of thousands of likes. Hundreds of thousands of views. Strangers commented things like, you go, girl, and Harvard's lucky to have you. Amara tried to respond to as many as she could, but the messages just kept coming. Even her favorite math professor from YouTube, Dr. Abrams, reposted her clip with the caption, This young woman is the future of STEM. Remember her name. The pride, the support, the energy, it lit her world like fireworks. She began preparing her summer before college with the kind of intensity only she could bring. Early in the mornings, she studied advanced linear algebra. At night, she worked through abstract problem sets from old Harvard courses she found online. Sometimes, she would sit on the roof with her notebook in hand, scribbling formulas under the stars. Then came the news. It started with a headline. Breaking, New immigration and higher education policy announced, federal restrictions to impact certain scholarship recipients. Amara's phone buzzed all day. People tagging her. Texting her. Asking if she was okay. She didn't understand why. She wasn't undocumented. She wasn't international. She was born right here, in Cook County Hospital, the ink on her birth certificate as American as apple pie. But the new law wasn't about citizenship. It was about a sweeping attempt by the administration to reshape college admissions. A policy aimed at limiting what they called affirmative displacement, a phrase that made Amara's stomach churn. The law targeted students who had received specific types of federally funded scholarships, claiming those funds would now be redirected to priority citizens from qualified zip codes, as defined by a narrow new metric. Southside Chicago was not one of them. Within a week, Amara received another envelope. This one was thin. No crimson crest. No elegant font. Dear Miss Johnson, we regret to inform you that due to newly enacted federal policy changes, your offer of admission and financial aid package has been placed under review. Please await further instructions. We understand the difficulty of this situation and appreciate your patience during this unprecedented time. The paper slipped from her hands and fell to the floor like a dropped hope. No, she murmured. No, no, no. Lorna sat down beside her, holding her close, but Amara didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared. Not at the letter, but at the walls around her. At the shelves filled with books. At the dreams that now hung in midair, waiting for permission to land. News of the policy spread quickly, and Amara's case became one of many. Students from underserved areas across the country were seeing their college futures thrown into chaos. But something about her story stuck. Maybe it was the video that had gone viral. Maybe it was her age. Maybe it was the math. But people remembered her. The same reporter returned to their home. This time, her smile was softer, her voice more serious. Amara, how does it feel to have come so far, only to be told you might not be able to go? Amara took a deep breath. I solved equations professors couldn't solve. I won competitions for a school that didn't believe in me. I did everything right. And now they're saying the numbers don't count. But they're wrong. Math doesn't lie. And neither does effort. She paused. If they think I'm going to stay silent, they've underestimated the wrong girl. The camera zoomed in on her face. Determined. Angry. Ready. Her words went viral again. This time, it wasn't just students cheering her on, it was professors, celebrities, politicians, activists. People who knew what it meant to be denied something you earned simply because of where you came from. The government wasn't ready for the storm they had unleashed. And Amara Johnson was only just beginning to raise her voice. The morning after her second interview aired on national television, Amara woke up to a new kind of buzz, not just from her phone but from the outside world. Her inbox had exploded. Her Instagram DMs were flooded. Her story was now everywhere. Hey Amara, I saw your interview. You're a hero. I'm a teacher in Detroit and my students are talking about you non-stop. We're with you. Keep fighting. You speak for all of us. She was overwhelmed but focused. There was no time to be overwhelmed. While the world was reacting, she was calculating. She set up her laptop at the kitchen table, opened 6 browser tabs, and began poring over the new federal legislation. It was technical. Vague in places, precise in others. But one thing became clear, the new law used flawed metrics. The so-called qualified zip codes were determined by economic growth indexes from 5 years ago, ignoring recent revitalization in communities like hers. Worse, the policy had been implemented retroactively, penalizing students like her for decisions they made before the law even existed. Her mind spun with calculations and strategy. This isn't just wrong morally, she told her mom. It's wrong mathematically. Lorna sat with her, sipping coffee. Then prove it, baby. Just like you always do. That night, Amara stayed up until 3 a.m. She created a full data report, charts, graphs, neighborhood trajectories, scholarship demographic breakdowns. She showed how the new policy disproportionately affected Black and Latino students from underfunded school districts. She compared numbers from her own neighborhood with so-called qualified ones that had higher crime rates and lower academic performance. Then she posted it all. She titled the document, "The Numbers They Chose to Ignore." It took only a few hours for the post to be shared thousands of times. By the afternoon, it had been retweeted by multiple Harvard professors, a former U.S. Education Secretary, and even a senator from Massachusetts. The media picked it up next. CNN did a segment with the headline, "Teen Math Genius Dismantles Federal Education Policy in Viral Report." Amara was invited onto podcasts, morning shows, even a late-night interview with a sympathetic host who looked at her over the desk and said, "You just did more with one spreadsheet than some lawmakers do in a year." But not everyone was supportive. On social media, anonymous accounts posted comments like, "She only got in because of her race. This is what happens when schools lower standards. She's just playing the victim card." Amara read them. Every single one. Not because she believed them, but because she wanted to remember what she was fighting against. Ignorance. Resentment. The idea that her intelligence needed to be validated by anyone other than herself. One morning, an email came through that made her heart stop. Subject, Letter of Concern, Department of Education. It was from a government official. The message was cold. Clinical. They requested that Amara remove her data analysis, claiming it used unauthorized demographic data and posed a potential violation of federal confidentiality guidelines. Lorna stood over her shoulder reading the email. "What do they mean, unauthorized?" she asked. Amara's eyes narrowed. "It means they're scared." Rather than delete the post, she published a follow-up titled, "When the Truth Becomes Inconvenient." In it, she detailed how every data point she used came from public education records, census reports, and economic studies, all freely available. She included links, sources, footnotes. Then she added, "I'm not sorry for being smart. I'm not sorry for speaking truth. And I'm definitely not sorry for being Black." The post hit a nerve, and a new level of virality. This time, celebrities picked it up. An award-winning actress tweeted, "This young woman just reminded us that knowledge is power. Somebody get her a full ride already." One night, Amara got a call from someone she never expected, Dr. Franklin Monroe, a senior Harvard admissions officer. "Amara," he said, his voice gentle but serious. "I want to personally tell you that we're reviewing your case carefully. A lot is happening behind the scenes." "Are you going to reverse the decision?" she asked. "I can't promise anything yet," he replied. "But I can tell you this, people are listening. You've started something that's bigger than even Harvard." That night, for the first time in weeks, Amara cried. Not because she was scared. But because the fight was real now, and she wasn't fighting alone anymore. The next morning, a group of Harvard alumni launched a petition demanding that the university publicly reinstate Amara's admission and reject any federal pressure to rescind scholarship offers. Within 48 hours, it had 300,000 signatures. Then, a massive student walkout took place at over a dozen campuses across the country. Students held signs that read, "Let her in. Merit doesn't need a zip code. Amara speaks for us." She watched the footage online, stunned. One student on camera said, "Amara Johnson reminded us what higher education is supposed to be about. Not politics. Not quotas. But brilliance." Despite the attention, despite the groundswell of support, Amara still had no answer from Harvard. No clarity. Just the same vague promise of review. And yet, in her heart, something had changed. She no longer felt like a girl begging for a seat at someone else's table. She was becoming a builder of new tables. New rooms. New rules. As she wrote in her journal that night. They tried to shut me out, but all they did was give me a bigger stage. It started with a single knock. Amara looked up from her laptop. It was Saturday morning, and she was still wearing her Harvard hoodie, the one she almost threw out the day she received the rejection letter. She opened the door and froze. There were people outside. Not one or two. Dozens. Students. Parents. Local activists. Journalists. Neighbors. Even the mailman who had delivered her Harvard letter months ago was standing in the back holding a sign that read, "Let Amara in." Her mom stepped up beside her. What in the world? A young girl, maybe 12 years old, stepped forward. She held a handwritten poster with glittery purple letters. "I want to be like you." Amara blinked, stunned. I didn't know anyone was coming." The crowd began clapping. Then cheering. And finally, chanting. "Amara! Amara! Amara!" It wasn't a protest. It was a movement. That day, Amara stood on her front steps and gave her first spontaneous public speech. No notes. No media coaching. Just her voice, and her story. "I never asked to be a symbol," she began, "but I won't shy away from it either. Because this fight was never just about me. It's about every student who's ever been told they're not enough because of where they're from. Because of what they look like. Because they don't fit into someone else's version of success." The crowd quieted. Even the kids listened. "I didn't go viral because I'm a genius. I went viral because people are tired of watching doors slam on talent. I just happened to push one open loud enough for the country to hear." Cameras clicked. Phones recorded. Her words spread like wildfire online. That afternoon, Amara's mailbox overflowed with handwritten letters, some from high schoolers in California, others from grandmothers in Alabama. A package arrived from a robotics club in Chicago, a handmade trophy that read, "Our champion in STEM." Then came the emails. Colleges. Think tanks. Tech companies. MIT offered her a spot in their summer math institute. Stanford invited her to speak at a diversity in data science panel. A startup in New York wanted her to lead a youth initiative. Even NASA reached out. A recruiter said, "If you ever want to intern, we'd be honored to have you." Amara sat in silence, reading each message. She should have felt proud. She should have felt triumphant. But instead, she felt torn. "I didn't want to become a symbol," she told her mom that night at the dinner table. "I just wanted to go to college." Lorna reached out, took her hand. "Maybe your journey is college now, baby. Maybe the whole country became your campus." But Amara still longed for the one place that had lit the fire in her since she was 11, Harvard. That dream hadn't faded. It just hurt now. Meanwhile, inside Harvard's crimson walls, something was brewing. Students had begun a sit-in at the Office of Admissions. Faculty had issued an open letter criticizing the university's silence. Black alumni groups organized a virtual town hall where over 4,000 people joined to discuss race, access, and justice in higher education. A tenured mathematics professor, Dr. Lena Whitford, publicly resigned from an advisory board in protest. In her resignation letter, she wrote, "When a university denies brilliance in the name of bureaucracy, it stops being a sanctuary of learning and becomes a fortress of fear." Amara Johnson represents everything Harvard claims to value. If she's not welcome here, then perhaps none of us are. The New York Times ran the quote on their front page under the headline, "The Harvard Dilemma." Despite the firestorm, Harvard remained quiet. Until the letter came. It was a crisp white envelope, bearing the university's seal in deep maroon. It was addressed to Amara, no email, no press release, just paper and ink. She held it in her hands, heart pounding. Her mom stood beside her, holding her breath. She opened it. And read. The first line made her knees buckle. Dear Amara Johnson. After careful review and a unanimous recommendation from the Reconsideration Committee, we are pleased to inform you. She dropped the letter and screamed. Her mom screamed too. Tears. Laughter. The kind of joy that breaks like a dam after weeks of holding pain inside. She was in. Officially. Unconditionally. The scholarship had been reinstated. The rejection overturned. But the letter didn't stop there. In recognition of your extraordinary advocacy and commitment to educational equity, we would also like to extend an invitation for you to speak at our fall symposium on diversity in academia. Amara sat down, stunned. The girl they tried to silence was now being asked to speak. The door they closed had opened even wider. Later that night, she tweeted one simple line. See you this fall, Harvard. It got over 1 million likes. But it wasn't about the likes anymore. It was about what came next. The first time Amara saw Harvard Yard in person, it didn't feel real. She'd seen it in pictures, in documentaries, in the background of award-winning speeches, but now she was here, her own footsteps echoing on the cobblestone walkways, her suitcase rolling behind her as she passed the iconic Johnston Gate. Everything smelled like old books and ambition. The air buzzed with movement. Parents hugging their kids goodbye, freshmen looking at campus maps upside down, bicycles zipping by, and voices bouncing between centuries-old buildings. Amara kept her expression steady, but her heart beat wildly in her chest. Not because of nerves, but because of what it had taken to get here. She wore her signature denim jacket, faded, patched, a bit too big, and underneath it, the same Black Girl Math Magic t-shirt she wore during her first viral video. She wasn't trying to make a statement, but she also wasn't about to shrink who she was. Not now. Not ever again. Her dorm, Weld Hall, stood like a red brick promise. She opened the door to her room and found her new roommate, Jenna Kim, already unpacking. Jenna looked up, smiled wide, and said, "Wait, you're that Amara Johnson, right?" Amara laughed. "Depends on what you've read." Jenna nodded at the corner of the room. "That desk's yours. I left the side by the window for you. You deserve the light." Word spread quickly across campus that Amara had arrived. Some students approached her shyly in the dining hall to say thank you for inspiring them. Others asked for advice on navigating the admissions process as students of color. A few just wanted to say they were proud. She appreciated all of it, but she wasn't here to be a celebrity. She was here to study. And that meant getting back to the one place she always felt fully herself, math. Her first lecture was in a large, echoing hall with polished wood benches and a professor who'd published more math papers than Amara had birthdays. As he began the lesson on real analysis, Amara's fingers flew across her notebook. Derivatives, integrals, epsilon delta proofs, she absorbed it all like oxygen. Midway through class, the professor paused, looked around, and posed a problem no one dared raise their hand for. No one but her. She solved it on the board in 2 minutes. When she turned around, the room was dead silent. Then came the applause. It wasn't loud. Just a few claps here and there. But it was enough. Later that day, the professor stopped her in the hallway. "Your proof was elegant," he said, adjusting his glasses. "Reminds me of someone I once taught. His name was Terence Tao. You ever heard of him?" Amara nearly choked. Terence Tao was a math prodigy, a living legend. She nodded. "I've read all his papers." The professor smiled. I suspect one day, people will say the same about yours. Despite the excitement, not everything came easy. Some students treated her like a myth instead of a peer. Others expected her to be the spokesperson for every issue related to race, gender, or poverty. During one seminar, a classmate casually said, "You only got in because of all that media stuff, right?" Amara stared at him. Calmly. Firmly. "No," she said, "I got in because I earned it. The media just helped you notice." The room went quiet. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough. Evenings were her favorite. She often stayed up late in the common room, tutoring classmates who struggled with calculus or linear algebra. Word spread fast: if you didn't understand something, go find Amara. She had a way of explaining even the hardest problems in a way that felt like storytelling. Math, she'd say, isn't about numbers. It's about patterns, logic, beauty. It's the language the universe whispers in. One Friday night, as autumn leaves danced outside the window and music played softly from someone's speaker, Amara looked around the room, diverse, brilliant students from all over the country, and felt something she hadn't felt in months: peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because she had finally arrived not just at a place, but in her purpose. The next morning, she received an unexpected email. Subject: Keynote Speaker Invitation, National Summit on Education Equity. The body read, "We would be honored to have you deliver a speech about your journey, the intersection of talent and policy, and what institutions can do to support students like you." Attached was a formal invitation. The event would be televised nationally. Political leaders, university presidents, and changemakers from across the country would be there. Amara read it 3 times. Then closed her laptop. She walked outside into the yard and sat under a tree, watching students toss a frisbee. A professor passed by on a bicycle. Somewhere nearby, someone was reciting lines from Shakespeare. The moment felt still. Centered. She whispered to herself, "They tried to shut the door. But now they're asking me to walk through it, head high." She didn't answer the invitation right away. Not because she was afraid, but because she wanted her next step to be intentional. Her story had brought her here. Her voice had shaken the system. But now came the real work, becoming the mathematician she was always meant to be. And when she chose to speak again, it would be not just as a symbol, but as a scholar. 3 days passed before Amara responded to the invitation. Not because she wasn't honored, but because she needed time to sit with what it truly meant. Speaking at the National Summit on Education Equity wasn't just another line on a resume. It was a podium that had once seemed galaxies away, now offered to a girl who used to study under a flickering porch light in Alabama because her home's electricity had been shut off. Accepting meant more than delivering a speech, it meant standing as a voice for every brilliant student who'd ever been told, "People like you don't belong here." When she finally clicked, accept, the weight didn't lessen. If anything, it grew. She'd be the youngest speaker in the summit's history. Her name would be on the same list as senators, CEOs, Ivy League presidents, and education reformers. Harvard supported her fully, offering public speaking coaches and faculty mentors to help her prepare. But none of them could truly understand what she carried with her, the pressure to not only be perfect but to represent millions. Late at night, Amara found herself pacing the empty corridors of the mathematics building, her fingers trailing along chalkboard edges. She thought about the version of herself from just a year ago, staring at a rejection letter that broke her heart. She thought about Mama's trembling hands when they saw the reversal in the news. And she thought about the classmates back home who never even got a chance. Her speech began slowly. A sentence here. A memory there. She didn't want to recite statistics. She wanted people to feel what it was like to sit in a classroom where your potential was doubted before you even opened your mouth. She wanted them to feel the sting of hearing, "You're smart for a black girl." She wanted them to understand what it meant to fight, not just to get into the room, but to stay in it. Jenna helped her practice, listening late into the night, giving feedback like, "Make that part sharper," or "You're powerful when you pause right there." Professors offered tips, telling her to stand tall, breathe from your core, and remember, this stage is yours, not borrowed. Even the dining hall staff cheered her on, slipping her extra dessert and saying, "Make em listen, baby." Finally, the day arrived. The summit was held in Washington, D.C., in a marble hall packed with chandeliers, velvet seating, and cameras positioned like watchful eyes. As she stepped backstage, wearing a crisp navy blazer and her silver pendant with the African continent etched into it, she felt her palms sweat. Her heart thudded like a drumline. But she kept walking. The moderator introduced her. "Next, we welcome a freshman from Harvard University whose story has captured the nation, a young woman whose journey forces us to ask whether our systems truly serve all students. Please welcome Amara Johnson." Applause. Not roaring, but respectful, curious, waiting. She stepped to the podium. Looked out at rows of decision-makers, educators, activists. Took a breath. And began. "I was never supposed to be here." Silence. "I was born in a town where the textbooks were older than the teachers. Where gifted programs were shut down before they could begin. Where no one ever told little black girls that math could be their language." She paused, let it sink in. "When I got into Harvard, they said it was a mistake. That the media made it happen. That I was a symbol, not a scholar. But let me tell you something, symbols don't solve equations. And scholars don't need permission to exist." Heads nodded. Pens scribbled. Phones recorded. "I didn't come here today to say I'm exceptional. I came to say I'm not. I'm just visible. There are thousands of students like me, sharp, driven, brilliant, who get filtered out before anyone even sees them. Not because they lack talent. But because we built a system that decides merit based on zip code, wealth, and legacy status." A murmur passed through the crowd. She continued, voice steady, but now with fire. "Education isn't broken. It's unequal. It's unbalanced. It's rigged to reward those who've always had the map. And I'm here to redraw it." The next 10 minutes were a storm of truth wrapped in clarity. She shared stories, not just hers, but others, students who worked 2 jobs and still got straight A's, students who coded apps on borrowed laptops, who taught themselves calculus from YouTube because no teacher was available. She didn't just point out the problem, she called for action. For scholarship reforms. For mentorship programs. For admissions policies that didn't see diversity as a box to check but as the fuel for innovation. By the time she said her final words, "Let's stop asking whether students like me belong and start asking whether the system ever deserved us in the first place." The audience was on its feet. A standing ovation. The kind that wasn't just polite but full of reckoning. Afterward, reporters swarmed her, and conference attendees lined up just to shake her hand. A senator whispered, "We needed to hear that." An admissions officer said, "You've changed how I'll do my job." A young girl, maybe 12, hugged her and said, "I want to be a math girl too." Back at her hotel room, alone again, Amara finally sat down. Not to celebrate, but to breathe. To reflect. She looked out the window at the Capitol dome and whispered, "I didn't just speak. I was heard." She opened her laptop. Dozens of new emails. One stood out. Subject, Meeting Request, U.S. Department of Education. She clicked it open. "Ms. Johnson, in light of your powerful address, we would like to invite you to participate in a roundtable to advise on federal education policy for underserved students. We believe your insight is not only timely, but essential." Amara stared at the screen. Just a few months ago, they tried to silence her with policy. Now, they were asking for her guidance. It was poetic. But it was also justice. Not for her alone, but for every student who had ever waited for someone to make space for them. She didn't hesitate this time. She replied, "Yes. I'll be there." The days following the summit were a whirlwind. National media picked up Amara's speech, and soon her face was on television screens across the country. Morning shows called her the voice of the new generation. Think pieces praised her for reigniting the education debate. Harvard posted the speech on its official homepage with the caption, "Proud to stand beside her." Students on campus greeted her like a celebrity. Professors shook her hand in hallways, telling her she had spoken truth to power in a way few ever dared. But just as quickly as the praise rolled in, so did the backlash. It started with a tweet. A prominent political commentator posted a clip of her speech, selectively edited to make her sound angry, ungrateful, and divisive. He captioned it, "Harvard admits activist, not academic. This is what meritocracy gets replaced with." It went viral. Within hours, there were threads attacking her intelligence, her appearance, her family. Anonymous accounts called her an affirmative action fraud, a race hustler, even un-American. Some claimed she only got into Harvard to push a political agenda. Others called for the university to revoke her admission. Then came the emails. Dozens of them, some masked behind fake names, others shockingly blunt. They told her to go back to where you came from, called her every slur imaginable, and warned her to stay in her lane. One message ended with, "We're watching." At first, Amara tried to brush it off. She told herself it came with the territory, being visible meant being vulnerable. But the weight grew heavier by the day. The same online platforms that once celebrated her were now flooded with hate. Every time she opened her phone, it felt like stepping into a war zone. She started leaving her dorm late at night to avoid people. Her once vibrant smile dimmed. She skipped meals. She stopped answering calls, even from Jenna. Harvard's administration reached out, offering counseling, campus security support, even legal resources. But none of it could erase the ache in her chest. Not just from fear, but from betrayal. She had spoken from a place of love. For learning, for justice, for all the students like her. And yet, she was being treated like a threat. One night, she found herself back in the math building, sitting in the same classroom where she'd solved her first advanced calculus problem just weeks before. The blackboard was blank, but her mind was racing. She asked herself if it was worth it. The speech. The spotlight. The fight. Was this what it meant to lead? To be a voice? Was the cost too high? That's when Jenna walked in, holding 2 mugs of cocoa and a look of fierce sisterhood. "I figured you'd be here," she said quietly, sitting beside her. "You've gone ghost on me, girl. Don't think I didn't notice." Amara tried to smile, but her eyes filled with tears instead. "They hate me, Jenna. People I don't even know. They're threatening me like I committed a crime." Jenna's face softened, but her voice stayed strong. "They hate you because you told the truth. And the truth makes people uncomfortable. But that doesn't make it wrong. It makes it powerful." Amara looked down. "I just wanted them to hear what it's like, to try so hard, to be told you're not enough, and still rise." "And they did hear you," Jenna said. "But some people don't like what they hear when it challenges the stories they've told themselves their whole lives. That doesn't mean you stop talking. It means you talk louder." That night, something in Amara shifted. Not the fear, it still lingered. But beside it, a new resolve took root. She realized that the goal had never been to make everyone comfortable. It was to make the invisible visible. To drag hard truths into the light and give them a name. She wasn't just representing students like her, she was them. Their battles, their brilliance, their hopes. She couldn't afford to go silent. So, the next morning, she wrote an op-ed titled, "I Am Not Your Exception." In it, she detailed not only her personal story but the systemic inequities that too often went unchallenged. She addressed the attacks, the lies, the fear tactics, and then flipped the mirror back on the critics. Yes, I am a black girl at Harvard. Yes, I speak out. And no, I will not apologize for existing loudly in a space that was never designed for me. I am not here because of pity, nor preference. I am here because I earned it. And I will not shrink to make anyone else more comfortable. The piece was published in the Washington Post and instantly made waves. Students across the country began sharing their own stories under the hashtag #NotYourException. Videos flooded TikTok and Instagram, black and brown students reciting lines from her speech, quoting her op-ed, holding up signs that read, "We belong here." Even some of the critics backtracked when faced with the public support she was receiving. Educational leaders began inviting her to speak again, this time not just about her story, but about reform. The Department of Education confirmed that she would be part of the advisory roundtable. One senator even introduced a bill titled the Equal Access in Higher Education Act, citing Amara's story as a national wake-up call. Still, Amara knew the fight wasn't over. But for the first time in days, she felt something like peace, not because the hate had disappeared, but because she had chosen not to disappear with it. And as she walked across campus that afternoon, surrounded by students who nodded, waved, and smiled, she realized something profound. Her voice had become more than her own. It had become a chorus. The momentum that Amara had ignited wasn't just a spark, it was a wildfire spreading across campuses, communities, and conversations nationwide. What started as one girl's story quickly became a movement demanding change. Yet, with every step forward, the stakes grew higher. Amara found herself invited to speak at universities across the country, from community colleges in the Midwest to Ivy League campuses on the East Coast. Each speech was met with thunderous applause and tears from students who saw themselves in her. They whispered stories of their own struggles, being told they weren't the right fit, that their dreams were too big, that the system simply wasn't built for them. Amara listened, absorbing every word, realizing how deep the wound ran. Back in Washington, the Senate was divided but leaning toward reviewing the controversial new law that had barred her entry to Harvard. Lawmakers debated fiercely on the Senate floor. Opponents argued the law was necessary for maintaining standards and protecting meritocracy. Supporters cited Amara's story as evidence of systemic bias disguised as policy. The bill to repeal the restriction was a beacon of hope, but it was not guaranteed to pass. Then came the call that shook Amara's world. Harvard's president invited her for a private meeting. The university wanted to show solidarity, but the invitation also carried a delicate political weight. The administration was walking a tightrope between supporting Amara and navigating the fierce backlash from certain alumni and donors. When Amara entered the elegant office overlooking the Boston skyline, she felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. The president, a kind but cautious woman, smiled warmly. "Amara, your courage has touched so many. But we must be careful. This isn't just about one student. It's about the future of the university, and the country." Amara nodded, understanding the complexity but firm in her resolve. "I'm not just fighting for myself. I'm fighting for every student who's ever been told no, because of their skin, their background, or their zip code. This isn't political, it's justice." The president sighed, then leaned forward. "We want to help. But we also want to make sure this is sustainable. The board is concerned about the optics. They want assurances that we aren't just making a political statement but fostering real inclusion." Amara's eyes burned with determination. Inclusion isn't a gesture. It's a commitment. It's about changing hearts, minds, and policies, not just admissions letters. Outside that office, Amara realized she was no longer just a student. She was a symbol. A bridge between hope and reality. She felt the pressure, but also the power. The fire inside her wouldn't burn out. Meanwhile, at home, her family struggled with the sudden spotlight. Her mother worried constantly, asking if the hate mail had stopped. Her father urged her to be cautious, reminding her how quickly public opinion could turn. Yet, they were proud. Her little brother, who once mimicked her by solving math problems with crayons, now told everyone at school, "My sister is a hero." In school, Amara's peers rallied like never before. They organized fundraisers for scholarships, diversity workshops, and tutoring programs. The student newspaper dedicated an entire issue to her story, with editorials calling for reform and interviews with other marginalized students. The campus was alive with conversation, protests, and hope. But not everyone was on board. The governor of the state released a statement doubling down on the law, calling it a necessary measure to uphold educational standards. Conservative media amplified the message, painting Amara as a political pawn. Hate groups organized protests outside her dorm. The campus police increased patrols. Amara's phone buzzed constantly. Some messages were from strangers offering support, others were threats. Her social media was a battleground. But each morning, she woke with the same unshakable purpose. One evening, as she sat on the steps of the campus library, Jenna joined her. "You're a lightning rod, Amara. But also a beacon. People are scared, but they're also inspired." Amara looked up at the stars, thinking of the long journey ahead. "I don't know how this ends, Jenna. But I do know this, I'm not backing down." Her phone buzzed again. A notification from the Senate. News outlets were reporting a vote scheduled for next week on the repeal of the admissions law. The entire country was watching now. The story of a black math prodigy who refused to be silenced had become a defining moment in the fight for educational equality. Amara knew the battle was far from over. But for the first time, she felt the tide turning. And she was ready to ride the wave. The day of the Senate vote arrived with an electric tension hanging over Washington, D.C., as if the entire nation was holding its breath. News cameras crowded the Capitol steps, reporters shouting questions and capturing every glimpse of the senators arriving in their tailored suits and determined expressions. Inside the marble halls, Amara sat quietly in a reserved gallery seat, flanked by her parents and Jenna, her heart pounding in sync with the thundering echoes of history in the making. Outside, a sea of protesters gathered, chanting slogans that ranged from hopeful to hostile. Supporters held signs reading "Equal Opportunity Now," while opponents waved banners insisting on "Merit above all." The air was thick with anticipation, every moment stretching like the seconds before a thunderclap. As the Senate session commenced, speeches began pouring forth. Some senators recounted stories of their own struggles to break barriers. Others argued passionately about the importance of diversity not just as a moral imperative but as a catalyst for innovation. A few voiced concerns about standards, but many countered with data highlighting systemic inequities that had long been ignored. When it came time to address the law that had barred Amara's admission, the chamber fell into a heavy silence. The senator sponsoring the repeal bill spoke with conviction, "This isn't about charity or special treatment. It's about recognizing talent that has been sidelined by outdated policies and prejudices. We owe it to our nation's future to remove these barriers." Minutes stretched into hours. Cameras captured every facial twitch, every whispered conversation. Amara gripped her mother's hand, willing strength from their touch. Her mind replayed every speech she had given, every equation solved under late-night lamplight, every insult endured. She thought of the thousands of students whose dreams had been deferred or crushed by similar rules. This vote was for them. Finally, the roll call began. Senator Adams. A pause. Aye. Senator Thompson. No. Each voice echoed through the chamber, a cacophony of hope and resistance. The count was tight. The tension unbearable. When the last senator's vote was announced, the chamber erupted, some in cheers, others in stunned silence. The repeal had passed by the narrowest of margins. Outside, the crowd exploded in celebration. Reporters swarmed Amara as she descended the steps, their questions a blur. She smiled through tears, feeling the weight of the moment settle like a warm dawn. Her fight, her voice, had helped change the law. Harvard's admission ban was lifted, and her place there was secured once again. But the victory was bittersweet. The battle had revealed deep divides, and Amara knew the path forward would be long and fraught with challenges. Still, she was determined to push on, not just for herself, but for every student who deserved a chance to shine. That night, in a quiet dorm room filled with textbooks and memories, Amara reflected on the journey. The fear, the pain, the courage, it had all led here. And as she looked out the window at the city lights twinkling like distant stars, she whispered a promise to herself: this is just the beginning. The campus was alive with energy unlike anything Amara had ever seen. The once quiet halls now buzzed with conversations about change, equality, and hope. Posters promoting diversity events adorned bulletin boards, and students of every background joined clubs and discussions about how to build a more inclusive future. Amara walked these halls with a quiet pride, knowing her journey had not only opened a door for herself but for countless others who would come after her. Her first day back at Harvard was surreal. The familiar scent of old books and polished floors mingled with the buzz of nervous excitement from freshmen eager to start their own stories. Faculty and students alike greeted her with smiles and nods of respect. The professors she admired welcomed her presence not as a token, but as a symbol of resilience and brilliance. She stepped into her advanced math lecture, feeling the weight of expectation but also the thrill of opportunity. The equations on the board were more than numbers and symbols, they were challenges she was born to conquer. Outside the classroom, Amara became a leader, quietly at first, then more boldly. She helped organize study groups, advocated for scholarship programs for underrepresented students, and spoke at panels about her experience. Her story had inspired a movement that reached beyond Harvard, sparking discussions in high schools, communities, and even government offices. News outlets followed her journey closely, often inviting her to share her insights on how education could become a true equalizer. But Amara never forgot the hardships that brought her here. She remained grounded by her family's love and the community that had lifted her up. Her mother's proud smile, her father's steady support, and Jenna's unwavering friendship were constant reminders that she was not alone. Every step forward was a tribute to their sacrifices and belief in her. One chilly autumn evening, as Amara sat on a bench under a canopy of golden leaves, she thought about the future. The challenges of systemic inequality were far from over, but so was the fire inside her. She dreamed of becoming a mathematician who not only solved complex problems but also opened doors for others. She envisioned a world where every talented student, regardless of race or background, had a seat at the table. In that moment, Amara understood something profound: her journey wasn't just about getting into Harvard or changing a law. It was about rewriting the story of what's possible. About showing that brilliance and determination could overcome even the most stubborn barriers. About inspiring a generation to rise, to fight, and to dream bigger. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow on the campus she now called home. Amara stood up, feeling the cool breeze brush against her face. With steady steps, she walked forward, not just as a student, but as a beacon of hope and change. Her story was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?